Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. Elonia pressed her tiny palm against the crystalline window of the royal chamber, watching the twin suns of Kinyar set behind the floating mountains. At 60 centimeters tall, she barely reached the windowsill, but the view had been her constant companion for 23 cycles. Tonight would be her last sunset on her homeworld. "Your Highness." The voice of her handmaiden Vara echoed through the chamber. "The diplomatic vessel awaits." Elonia turned, her luminescent blue skin casting faint shadows on the ornate walls. They're not even trying to hide their disdain anymore, are they? She glanced at the data crystal in her hand, intercepted messages that revealed the truth behind her diplomatic mission. Vara's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession. "My princess, don't." Elonia's voice carried the weight of her heritage. "We both know this is exile, not diplomacy." The door hissed open, revealing High Counselor Thex, his towering form blocking the entrance. "Princess Elonia, your transport departs in 30 minutes. His lips curled into what might have passed for a smile, if not for the cold calculation in his eyes. "How convenient that my stepbrother couldn't attend my departure," Elonia said, straightening her spine despite her diminutive stature. "Too busy practicing his coronation speech, perhaps." Thex's face hardened. "Mind your words, princess. Small as you are, they might be the last thing your people remember you by." "My people?" Elonia laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "The same people who've spent years parading me before every eligible noble in the galaxy. 'Look at our tiny princess,' they'd say. 'Surely one of you would take her off our hands.'" She moved toward the door, each step precise despite her size. "Save your threats, counselor. I've endured worse than exile." The corridors of the palace stretched before her like the maw of some ancient beast. Servants and guards averted their eyes as she passed, their thoughts betraying their relief through the telepathic frequencies she'd grown so attuned to. The last Kinyar princess, the biological mistake, finally being removed from sight. Her personal transport pod waited in the royal hangar, barely larger than a standard escape vessel. Fitting, she thought, for a princess they wished would disappear. "Your coordinates are preset," Thex announced, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "You'll be making diplomatic contact with the Zentaran Collective. They're expecting you." Lies. The Zentarans had rejected her hand in marriage 3 cycles ago, calling her a genetic dead end. But Elonia merely nodded, keeping her face neutral as she climbed into the pod. The vessel's systems hummed to life around her, displays flickering with pre-programmed routes. As the hangar doors parted, revealing the star-studded expanse of space, Elonia's fingers flew across the controls. If they wanted to exile her, fine. But she wouldn't be following their carefully planned path to obscurity. "Goodbye, Kinyar," she whispered, engaging the engines. "I hope the shame of what you've done haunts you for generations to come." The pod shot forward, but something was wrong. The controls weren't responding properly. Warning lights flashed across the console as the vessel lurched into an uncontrolled spin. Her last glimpse of the royal palace showed Thex's satisfied smile before the emergency protocols engaged, hurling her into the depths of uncharted space. Hours later, Elonia's pod spiraled through an unfamiliar sector, its navigation systems completely dead. She gripped the manual controls, her small hands straining against the resistance as warning klaxons blared around her. Come on, she muttered, punching in emergency codes. The pod shuddered violently as it entered the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Through the viewport, she caught glimpses of a harsh, rocky landscape rushing up to meet her. The impact threw her against her restraints. Metal screamed against stone as the pod skidded across the planet's surface, finally coming to rest in a cloud of reddish dust. For a moment, Elonia just sat there, her heart hammering against her ribs. A shadow fell across the cracked viewport. Something massive moved outside, blocking out the light of the system's distant sun. Elonia's telepathic senses screamed a warning seconds before a clawed appendage smashed through the pod's hull, ripping away chunks of metal like paper. She caught her first glimpse of the Tetrobactef as she scrambled from her restraints. The creature was enormous, a twisted mass of chitin and tentacles that seemed to defy natural law. Its multiple mouths gnashed with razor-sharp teeth as it tore into the pod. Elonia dove through a gap in the wreckage, her tiny size finally proving advantageous as she squeezed through spaces the monster couldn't reach. The rocky ground cut into her feet as she ran, her ceremonial dress already shredding at the hem. "Of course," she gasped between breaths. "They couldn't have exiled me somewhere pleasant." She ducked as a tentacle whipped overhead. "With beaches and cocktails." The creature's thundering steps gained on her. Elonia's lungs burned as she pushed her fragile body to its limits, scanning desperately for shelter. There, a narrow crevice in the rocks ahead might just be small enough. A tentacle wrapped around her waist, yanking her backward. Elonia screamed, more in fury than fear, as the Tetrobactef lifted her toward its gnashing maws. The sound of energy igniting cut through the air, followed by the distinctive hum of a plasma blade. Something flashed in Elonia's peripheral vision, a figure leaping from the rocks above, wielding what looked like a sword made of pure energy. The blade sliced through the tentacle, holding her with surgical precision. Elonia fell, but before she could hit the ground, strong arms caught her. She found herself cradled against a broad chest as her rescuer rolled them both behind a boulder. "Stay here," a male voice commanded. "Though, given your size, I doubt you'd get far anyway, little one." Elonia bristled at the comment, but before she could retort, the man was already moving. She peered around the boulder, watching as he engaged the monster with a grace that seemed impossible for someone his size. His plasma sword danced through the air, severing tentacles and drawing screeches of pain from the creature. "I have to admit," he called out between strikes, "this isn't the strangest thing I've found while salvaging, but it's definitely in the top 5. The Tetrobactef lunged, its remaining tentacles lashing out like whips. The man ducked and spun, his blade describing a perfect arc that split the creature clean in half. The two pieces fell with ground-shaking thuds, twitching before finally going still. Silence fell over the rocky plain. The man deactivated his sword and turned toward Elonia's hiding place, pushing sweat-dampened hair from his forehead. "You can come out now," he said, holstering his weapon, "unless you're enjoying the view from behind that rock." Elonia stepped into view, holding her head high despite her bedraggled appearance. Now that the immediate danger had passed, she got her first good look at her rescuer. He was human, tall and well-built, with features that managed to be both rugged and kind. His lips quirked into a half-smile as he studied her in return. "I'm Ryan Graves," he said, crouching down to be closer to her eye level. "And you are—" He paused, tilting his head. "Actually, what exactly are you? Some kind of escaped exotic pet?" Elonia's luminescent skin flared brighter with indignation. "I am not a pet." She straightened to her full height, all 60 centimeters of it, and glared up at him. "And I'd appreciate if you'd stop looming over me like that." Ryan's eyebrows shot up at her cultured accent. He sat down on a nearby rock, bringing himself closer to her level. "My apologies, madam. I shouldn't have assumed." His eyes sparkled with amusement. "Though you have to admit, finding a tiny blue woman running from a monster isn't exactly an everyday occurrence." "Perhaps in your limited experience," Elonia shot back, then immediately regretted her haughtiness. This man had just saved her life, after all. She softened her tone. But, thank you for the rescue. You're welcome. Ryan gestured at the wreckage of her pod. That yours? Looks like you had quite the landing. Elonia's hand instinctively went to the pocket holding the data crystal with evidence of her family's betrayal. There were complications during my journey, I'd say. Ryan stood and walked over to examine the wreckage. This is a Kiniar Royal Transport Pod. He turned back to her, his expression more serious. Which makes you... Nobody. Elonia cut him off quickly. Just a traveler. The pod was salvaged. Salvaged. Ryan's tone made it clear he didn't believe her, but he didn't press. Instead, he pulled out a handheld scanner and began taking readings of the wreckage. Well, nobody. Your salvaged pod isn't going anywhere. The nearest spaceport is about 3 days' walk from here, and that's assuming we don't run into any more of our tentacled friends. We? Elonia asked. Ryan shrugged. Unless you'd prefer to make the journey alone, though I have to warn you, this region is known for worse things than that Tetrobacheft. Elonia weighed her options. She had no supplies, no transportation, and no idea where in the galaxy she was. And while this human's tendency toward humor might be irritating, he had proven both capable and, so far, trustworthy. I suppose I could tolerate your company, she said finally, assuming you can keep up with me. Ryan burst out laughing. Keep up with... He shook his head, still chuckling. You know what? I think this is going to be an interesting journey. He reached down and offered her his palm. Would Milady care for a lift? Unless you'd prefer to take 10 steps for each of mine. Elonia wanted to refuse on principle, but practicality won out. She stepped onto his hand, gripping his thumb for balance as he carefully lifted her to his shoulder. If you make one more comment about my size, she warned, settling into position, I will make you regret it. Wouldn't dream of it, Ryan said, starting off across the rocky terrain. Though I am curious how exactly you'd manage that. Keep testing me, and you'll find out. As they traveled, Elonia found herself studying her unlikely companion. Despite his earlier bravado, he moved with careful precision, obviously mindful of his passenger. His shoulder provided a surprisingly comfortable perch, and she could sense no malice or deception in his surface thoughts, just genuine curiosity and an unexpected protectiveness. So, Ryan said after they'd been walking for a while, are we going to talk about why a Kiniar transport pod crashed in the middle of nowhere? Or should I just keep pretending I don't recognize royal engineering when I see it? Elonia tensed at his question. You seem quite knowledgeable about Kiniar technology. I'm a freelance engineer, Ryan said, navigating around a particularly treacherous boulder. I've worked on enough royal vessels to recognize the design, though I have to say the sabotage was particularly elegant. Sabotage? Elonia leaned forward, nearly losing her balance. Ryan caught her with practiced ease, steadying her on his shoulder. The navigation system was rigged to fail once you cleared Kiniar space. Not obvious enough to be detected pre-launch, but guaranteed to strand you in the outer reaches. He paused. Someone really wanted you gone. Elonia's laugh was bitter. My entire family wanted me gone. The last tiny princess of a dying race, too small to be politically useful. She stopped, realizing she'd revealed too much. I mean, Your Highness, Ryan said softly, your secret's safe with me, though I'd appreciate knowing why I'm harboring a runaway princess. Before Elonia could respond, a familiar whine cut through the air. A sleek ship appeared on the horizon, bearing the royal insignia of her stepbrother. They're already looking for me, she whispered. Ryan ducked behind an outcropping, his hand protectively cupped around Elonia to keep her steady. Friends of yours? My stepbrother's personal guard. If they find me, She trailed off, remembering the cold calculation in Thex's eyes. They won't. Ryan's voice held absolute certainty. My ship's hidden in a canyon about 2 kilometers from here. We can make it if we're careful. He glanced up at her. Unless you want to go back? Alania met his gaze. In that moment, she saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine concern, mixed with a hint of challenge. This human didn't see her as a political pawn or a genetic dead end. He saw her as someone worth protecting, and perhaps more importantly, as someone worth knowing. I'm never going back, she said firmly. Ryan grinned. Good answer. Hold on tight, Princess. Things are about to get interesting. As they crept through the rocky landscape, avoiding search beams and patrol ships, Elonia realized she'd found something unexpected in her exile. An ally who saw past her size to the person within. Whether that alliance would lead to salvation or further complications remained to be seen, but for the first time since discovering her family's betrayal, she felt something dangerously close to hope. The act closed with them reaching Ryan's hidden ship, a modified freighter that had clearly seen better days. As royal vessels circled overhead, they slipped aboard and prepared for departure. Elonia knew she was leaving behind everything she'd ever known, embarking on an uncertain future with a stranger who wielded a plasma sword and had an irritating tendency to make height jokes. But as she watched her stepbrother's ship searching the empty landscape below, she couldn't help but smile. They'd expected her to disappear quietly into exile. Instead, she was choosing her own path, even if that path started from a position 60 centimeters closer to the ground than most. Ready? Ryan asked from the pilot's seat. Elonia settled into the co-pilot's chair he'd hastily modified for her size. Ready. Just try not to get us killed. No promises, he said with a wink, but I'll do my best to keep us at least slightly above ground level. I'm already regretting this, Elonia muttered, but there was no real annoyance in her voice. As the ship lifted off, breaking through the atmosphere under the cover of a magnetic storm, she left behind not just her world, but the weight of everyone's expectations. Whatever came next would be on her own terms, tiny stature and all. 3 weeks after their escape, Ryan's ship drifted in the shadow of a massive space station orbiting Nexus Prime. Alania sat cross-legged on the ship's dashboard, watching him tinker with the navigation controls. You're doing it wrong, she said, suppressing a smile as he cursed at a spark from the wiring. Oh? Would Her Highness care to demonstrate the proper technique? Ryan wiped sweat from his brow, leaving a smudge of grease. Or are royal fingers too delicate for repair work? Instead of answering, Alania hopped down into the open panel. At her size, she could move easily between the components. Her small hands worked swiftly, reconnecting circuits that Ryan's larger fingers couldn't easily reach. Show off, he muttered, but his tone was warm. The system hummed to life. Elonia emerged, covered in dust but triumphant. You were saying? I'm saying we make a good team. Ryan lifted her out of the panel with practiced ease. These casual touches had become natural over their weeks together. Though I still think we should avoid populated stations. Your stepbrother's people can't hide forever, Elonia cut him off. We need supplies, and you need parts for that plasma converter you've been complaining about. Fine. Ryan set her on his shoulder, her usual perch. But we do this carefully. No drawing attention. 2 hours later, they were running for their lives through the station's marketplace. No drawing attention? Elonia shouted as they dodged laser fire. Excellent plan. Less criticism, more running. Ryan vaulted over a merchant's stall, one hand keeping Elonia secure. They'd been recognized almost immediately, not by authorities but by a group of bounty hunters drawn by the substantial reward her stepbrother had posted. Now they were caught in a firefight that was definitely drawing attention. Ryan ducked into an alley, his plasma sword humming to life. 3 hunters rounded the corner, weapons raised. "Hand over the princess," the lead hunter growled, "and maybe we'll let you live." "Counteroffer," Ryan said, then moved with shocking speed. His blade sang through the air, disarming the first hunter literally and figuratively. The second fell to a precise strike to the legs. The third turned to run, but found his path blocked by floating cargo containers, which Alania was controlling telepathically. "That's new," Ryan commented as they sprinted toward their ship. "A girl's gotta have some secrets," Alonia replied, her concentration never wavering as she used the containers to clear their path. They made it back to the ship with seconds to spare, breaking orbit just ahead of the station's security forces. As they jumped to hyperspace, Ryan turned to her. "We need to talk about these powers of yours." Elonia sighed. The moment she'd been dreading had arrived. "It's complicated." "Try me." Ryan set the ship on autopilot and turned his full attention to her. Those dark eyes that had become so familiar held nothing but patience and concern. "The Kiniar weren't always small," she began. "According to our histories, we were once a powerful race, both physically and mentally. But something changed. Some say it was a curse. Others blame genetic manipulation by our enemies. Whatever the cause, we began to shrink with each generation." She paced the dashboard, gathering her thoughts. "There's a prophecy, though most consider it just a legend now. It speaks of one who will restore our true form through the power of genuine love." She laughed bitterly. "That's why they paraded me before every noble in the galaxy. They thought an advantageous marriage might trigger the transformation. When it didn't work, they exiled you," Ryan finished softly. "My stepbrother convinced them I was defective, that I'd never fulfill the prophecy. Better to be rid of me so he could take the throne." Ryan leaned back in his pilot's seat, processing her words. "So these powers you've been showing, the telepathy, the telekinesis, they're getting stronger." "Yes." Alania met his gaze. "And it started when we—" She stopped, her luminescent skin glowing brighter with embarrassment. A proximity alarm blared, saving her from finishing that thought. Ryan's hands flew over the controls. "Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace," he reported. "Imperial signatures." Through the viewport, 5 sleek vessels materialized. At their center was a command ship Alania recognized all too well, her stepbrother's personal cruiser. "Attention unregistered vessel," a familiar voice crackled over the comm. "This is Prince Regent Malix. Surrender the fugitive Alonia immediately." Ryan's hand moved toward the weapons controls, but Ilania stopped him. "Wait, let me speak to him." Are you sure? He needs to hear this." She straightened her spine, channeling every lesson in royal bearing she'd ever received. "Open the channel." Malex's hologram appeared above the console, his perfect features twisted in a sneer. "Ah, little sister, still playing at Rebellion? And with a human, no less? How quaint." "Hello, brother." Alania's voice was ice. "Still playing at being king?" "I don't play, dear sister. I rule, while you run across the galaxy with this specimen." His gaze flicked dismissively to Ryan. "Though I must admit he's lasted longer than your other suitors. None of them could stomach the thought of bedding such a tiny—" The plasma sword ignited with a snap hiss. Ryan's expression promised violence. "Choose your next words carefully." Malix laughed. "Oh, this is precious. The human thinks he's worthy of Kiniar royalty. Tell me, sister, does he know about the prophecy? About how many others you failed to transform for? About how your very existence mocks our bloodline?" "I know everything," Ryan said before Alania could respond, "including how you sabotaged her ship, how you tried to murder her to secure your claim to the throne." Murder? Please. I merely arranged for a defective specimen to be removed, for the good of our people. Malex's smile turned cruel. Now, surrender her, and I might let you live. Resist, and I'll add your corpse to the collection of failed suitors who thought they could save my pathetic excuse for a sister. Ryan's response was to cut the transmission. He turned to Elonia, his expression fierce. We're not surrendering. No, she agreed, her heart pounding. We're not. The ship lurched as the first volley of enemy fire struck their shields. Ryan's hands danced over the controls, executing evasive maneuvers that seemed impossible for a vessel this size. Can you reach the auxiliary power controls? He asked as they dove between two Imperial ships. Elonia was already moving, using her size to access maintenance tunnels that would take too long to reach normally. What's the plan? Remember that plasma converter I've been complaining about? Yes? We're going to overload it, create a feedback pulse that should disable their shields. His voice turned grim. It might also blow us up. I love it when you talk romantic, Elonia called back, earning a surprised laugh from Ryan. The next few minutes were chaos. Ryan piloted like a man possessed, keeping them just ahead of destruction while Elonia rerouted power systems. The ship groaned under the strain. Ready, she shouted. Brace yourself. Ryan hit the trigger. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a wave of energy burst from their ship, rippling through space. The Imperial vessels went dark, their shields failing. Now what? Elonia asked, climbing back to her perch on Ryan's shoulder. He grinned. Now we run like hell. Their escape took them to the far reaches of known space. As the adrenaline faded, Elonia found herself watching Ryan pilot, noting how his hands moved with precise confidence over the controls. Something had changed during that confrontation with Malex, something neither of them were ready to name. They landed on a small, uninhabited planet with twin moons. The ship needed repairs after their desperate escape, but Elonia suspected Ryan had chosen this place for another reason. The clearing where they landed was beautiful, purple grass swaying in an alien breeze, bioluminescent flowers casting a soft glow in the gathering dusk. We should talk, Ryan said as they sat outside the ship, the twin moons rising overhead. About the prophecy? Elonia kept her voice neutral. About us. He turned to face her, his expression more serious than she'd ever seen it. These past weeks, they've changed things, changed me. Ryan, let me finish. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I'm not good at this. I've spent years alone, taking jobs, avoiding connections. Then you literally fell into my life, and suddenly everything's different. You're brilliant and brave and beautiful. And yes, you're tiny, but that doesn't matter because you're also the most powerful person I've ever met. Elonia's heart thundered in her chest. You don't understand. The prophecy. Everyone who's tried, I don't care about the prophecy. Ryan's voice was fierce. I care about you. The real you, not some legendary version. And if you stay exactly as you are forever, that would be perfectly. The rest of his words were lost as Elonia pressed her tiny lips to his. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then something extraordinary happened. Light erupted from Elonia's skin, not just the usual luminescence, but a radiance that filled the clearing. She felt a tingling sensation throughout her body, a warmth that started in her heart and spread outward. The world shifted around her, or rather, she shifted in relation to it. When the light faded, she stood eye to eye with Ryan. Her body had transformed, growing to match his height while maintaining her alien beauty. Her blue skin glowed with newfound power, and she could feel her telepathic abilities surging stronger than ever. Well, Ryan said after a long moment, that's new. Elonia laughed, the sound rich and full. She reached out with hands that were now perfectly sized to cup his face. "You were saying something about not caring if I stayed tiny forever." "I meant it." His arms wrapped around her waist, marveling at how perfectly they fit together now. "Though I have to admit, this is a nice bonus." The prophecy was real. Elania's voice held wonder. All this time, they were looking for the wrong thing. It wasn't about political alliances or noble marriages. It was about finding someone who loved me for who I was, not what I could become. "Speaking of becoming," Ryan said, "your brother is going to be furious when he sees you like this." "Let him be." Elania's eyes flashed with power. "I'm done hiding, done running. It's time to show the galaxy what real transformation looks like." As they stood together under the twin moons, Elonia realized that this wasn't just a physical change. She had found her strength, her voice, and her equal. The prophecy hadn't just transformed her body. It had given her the power to reshape her destiny. The exiled princess who had once been too small for anyone to take seriously now stood tall, ready to challenge an empire. And beside her stood the man who had seen her true worth all along, his plasma sword humming in harmony with her telepathic energy. "Ready for what comes next?" she asked. Ryan's answer was to pull her close for another kiss. "With you? Always." Above them, the twin moons cast their light on a new beginning, while across the galaxy, word began to spread of a transformation that would shake the foundations of power itself. News of Elania's transformation spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Holovids of her new form, tall, radiant, and unmistakably powerful, leaked from security feeds across 3 sectors. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within days. Elania and Ryan watched the broadcast from their ship, now hovering at the edge of Kiniar space. High Counselor Thex's face filled the screen, his expression grave. "The violation of our most sacred traditions cannot stand," he declared. "This human has corrupted our princess, triggering an unauthorized transformation that threatens the very foundation of our political system." "Unauthorized transformation?" Ryan scoffed. "I wasn't aware your biology needed political approval." "Shh." Elania leaned forward as her stepbrother took the podium. Malix cut an impressive figure in his royal regalia, but Elania could see the rage burning behind his practiced smile. "My dear sister has been led astray by a commoner, a human who knows nothing of our ways. For the sake of galactic stability, she must return home immediately to undergo proper evaluation and, if necessary, correction." "Correction?" Elania's hands clenched. The ship's instruments flickered in response to her anger. "They want to correct me back to my previous form." "Can they do that?" Ryan's hand went instinctively to his plasma sword. "They can try." Elania stood, her transformed height allowing her to move through the ship without accommodation for the first time. "But first, they'll have to catch us." The ship's sensors blared a warning. Multiple vessels were dropping out of hyperspace around them, a full Imperial battle fleet led by Malix's flagship. "Surrender, sister." Malix's voice filled their comm system. "You've had your adventure. Time to come home and face reality." Elania reached for the comm, but Ryan caught her hand. "Wait, look." Behind the Imperial fleet, more ships were appearing. Dozens, then hundreds of vessels of all sizes and configurations. "This is Captain Vara of the Free Kiniar movement," a familiar voice broadcast on all frequencies. Elania's former handmaiden continued. "We stand with Princess Elonia. The prophecy has been fulfilled, proving that our people's future lies in freedom, not constraint." "Traitors," Malix snarled. "You would side with this abomination?" "The only abomination," Elania broadcast back, her voice ringing with authority, is a system that values conformity over truth, that would rather exile its children than see them grow beyond its control. She closed her eyes, extending her enhanced telepathic powers. Across the fleet, minds opened to her presence, not just the rebel ships, but the Imperial crews as well. They felt her strength, her conviction, and most importantly, they felt her story. Through her mental link, they experienced everything: the mockery, the failed arrangements, the assassination attempt, and finally, the transformation born not of political necessity, but of genuine connection. "I am what our people were meant to be," she projected, both verbally and telepathically. Not bound by ancient constraints, but free to grow, to change, to love. Malex's response was to open fire. The battle erupted across the stars. Ryan's piloting skills kept them one step ahead of the Imperial weapons, while Elonia's telepathy coordinated the rebel fleet with unprecedented precision. "Their shields are adapting to our attack patterns," Ryan called out, executing a barrel roll to avoid a barrage of plasma torpedoes. Elonia reached out with her mind, scanning the enemy flagship. "Malex is routing power from life support to strengthen their defenses. He's desperate." "Good." Ryan's grin was fierce. "Desperate people make mistakes." As if proving his point, the Imperial fleet split their formation, trying to divide the rebel forces. It was a classic tactic, and a fatal error. "Now," Elonia commanded through her telepathic network. The rebel ships moved as one, collapsing the pocket of space Malex had tried to create. Imperial vessels found themselves surrounded, caught in a web of coordinated fire. "Sister!" Malex's voice crackled with static and fury. "You would destroy everything our ancestors built. And for what? A human? Your precious love?" "No, brother." Elonia's voice was steady as she maintained the telepathic connection across hundreds of ships. "I'm destroying what weak men like you built on the ruins of our true heritage. The Kinyar were never meant to be pawns in political games." Through their mental link, she showed everyone the truth she'd discovered in the ancient texts, how their people had once been spiritual leaders, using their gifts to unite rather than divide. The forced breeding programs, the political marriages, the obsession with physical form, all of it was a perversion of their original purpose. "You're lying," Malex spat, but doubt had crept into his voice. "Am I?" Elonia pushed harder, extending her telepathic reach to the very edges of the fleet. "Feel the truth, brother. Feel what real power is." In that moment, every mind connected to hers experienced a fraction of what she'd felt during her transformation: the rush of potential unleashed, the joy of becoming one's true self. Even the most hardened Imperial crews wavered. "My lord," they heard someone say on Malex's bridge, "the crew is... they're laying down their weapons." "What? I order you to..." Malex's words cut off in a grunt of pain. Through their link, Elonia felt Thex's familiar presence as the High Counselor finally chose a side. "Enough!" Thex's voice rang out. "The princess speaks the truth. I've served 3 generations of our rulers, watched as we twisted ourselves into smaller and smaller boxes of tradition. No more." Elonia opened her eyes to find Ryan watching her with a mixture of awe and pride. "Ready to address your people, Your Highness." She took his hand, drawing strength from the connection that had started all of this. "Ready to address all people. This isn't just about the Kinyar anymore." The flagship's grand assembly hall filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Elonia stood before them, no longer the tiny princess they'd mocked, but a leader whose presence commanded attention. Ryan stood at her side, his plasma sword powered down, but ready. "For centuries," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "we've built walls between species, between empires, between hearts. We called it tradition. We called it necessity. We called it politics." She paused, her luminescent skin pulsing with emotion. "We were wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Near the front, Malik sat in restraints, his face a mask of barely contained rage. "My transformation isn't just about physical change," Elonia continued. "It's proof that our potential, all of our potential, lies not in rigid traditions, but in the connections we forge, the barriers we break, the love we dare to embrace." "Pretty words," one of the council members called out. "But how does this help maintain galactic stability?" "Stability?" Ryan stepped forward. "Your kind of stability kept her trapped in a form that wasn't truly hers, kept her people trapped in outdated traditions. How's that working out for you?" Elonia placed a calming hand on his arm. "He's right. True stability doesn't come from forcing people into predetermined roles. It comes from allowing them to become who they're meant to be." She reached out with her telepathy, gentle this time, sharing not memories but possibilities. The assembled delegates gasped as they saw visions of a galaxy where differences were celebrated, where love wasn't constrained by species or status. "The prophecy spoke of transformation," she said softly, "but it wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, the power to change, to grow, to become more than what others decided we should be." "And what of those who refuse this change?" Malix demanded from his seat. "They're free to remain as they are." Elania's gaze swept the room. "That's the point, brother. Freedom, choice, the right to find one's own path, and the courage to walk it." The assembly erupted in discussion. Centuries of tradition clashed with the undeniable evidence before them. Here stood a princess who had defied every convention, who had found power not in political alliances, but in genuine connection with a human warrior. "The Kinyar Empire," Elonia declared, her voice rising above the chaos, "will no longer arrange marriages for political gain, will no longer judge worth by physical form, will no longer exile those who dare to be different." She turned to face the cameras broadcasting her words across the galaxy. "And to anyone who has ever felt too small, too different, too constrained by others' expectations, look to the stars. Your transformation awaits. Your love story is valid. Your truth is powerful." The hall fell silent, then erupted in applause. Even some of the hardline traditionalists found themselves moved by her words, by the living proof of possibility she represented. In the days that followed, change swept through the galaxy like a magnificent storm. The Kinyar Empire, under Elonia's leadership, became a beacon of transformation. Other worlds and species, inspired by her example, began questioning their own rigid traditions. Standing on the balcony of the royal palace, the same one from which she'd watched her last sunset before exile, Elonia felt Ryan's presence before he spoke. "Still can't get used to not having you on my shoulder," he said, joining her at the railing. "Missing your tiny princess?" She turned to him with a smile that lit up her luminescent skin. "Missing the woman who changed the galaxy." He nodded toward the city below, where beings of all species mingled freely. "Though I have to admit, you're doing pretty well at this whole revolutionary leader thing." "We did this," she corrected him. "Your courage to see past what everyone else saw, that's what started all of this." Below them, a group of young Kinyars practiced with training swords, their forms mimicking Ryan's fighting style. Not all of them were small anymore. The transformation, they'd discovered, could manifest in those who found their true connections, regardless of species. "Malix asked to speak with you," Ryan said after a moment. "Again. My brother will have plenty of time to reflect on his choices while he helps rebuild the outer colonies." Elonia's voice held no malice, only certainty. "Sometimes the greatest punishment is watching others achieve what you thought impossible." The twin suns began to set, casting the city in familiar golden light. But unlike that last sunset before her exile, Elonia now stood tall, transformed not just in body, but in spirit. Her telepathic senses could feel the hope radiating from countless minds across the galaxy. Beings of all kinds discovering that love, true love, could break any barrier. "Ready for whatever comes next?" Ryan asked, echoing their words from that night under the twin moons. Elonia took his hand, feeling the energy spark between them, the same connection that had started everything. "With you, always." Above them, ships of all designs soared through the darkening sky, their paths no longer divided by ancient boundaries. The galaxy was transforming, one heart at a time, and at its center stood a princess who had dared to become more than anyone thought possible, and the human who had helped her realize that sometimes the greatest power lies in being exactly who you are. And somewhere, in the deepest reaches of space, another small being looked to the stars and dared to dream of transformation. Thank you for joining Elonia and Ryan on their journey through the stars. May your own holiday season be as transformative as a kiss under twin moons and your Christmas shine as bright as a princess's luminescent skin. See you among the stars, your storyteller,